Hello everyone. My name is Howell and I will be presenting a talk on our paper, Visualizations to Summarize Search Behavior. Currently, the only sound and complete method for solving a constraint satisfaction problem is to use backtrack search, but backtrack search invariably suffers from thrashing. To reduce thrashing, it is industry practice to enforce a given consistency property. This comes at a trade-off because the property takes time to enforce. The trade-off of running a higher level consistency, higher than generalized arc consistency that is poorly understood. Finally, past works have focused on metrics calculated at the end of search, but in this paper we propose to summarize the search process as a whole instead. So our contributions in this work include a criteria for computing the distance between two time samples based on the backtrack per depth metric proposed by Woodward et al. We then use this distance metric to cluster the samples taken during the search process, and we create a history of qualitatively distinct regimes or time intervals. Finally, we present a new visualization that examines the behavior of variable ordering heuristics. Our distance metric is based on the Kullback-Leibler divergence, or KL divergence, and aims to capture the change in the shape of the BPD. We then use this metric to perform agglomerative hierarchical clustering. We start with the samples, and then we successively build up a clustering tree, and then cut the tree at a user-defined detail level. We are able to use this summarization process to find a structural issue in the MUG 125.3 benchmark instance. We further propose a visualization of the variable ordering by looking at the number of instantiations of each variable at each depth. We do so in a heat map, where we have on the x-axis the depth of the search tree and on the y-axis the variables of the instance. To order the variables in the instance, we calculate a weighted depth and order the variables accordingly. This helps us to explain why DOM-DEG can do better on another benchmark instance, as opposed to DOM-WDEG, which usually performs the best. In our talk, we show how the summarizations can be used to explain the changing behavior of search, the use cases for researchers and developers to study the impacts of specific strategies, and how the summarizations can catch small and large behavior that a human cannot be expected to. So come view our talk if that sounds interesting to you. Thank you. Hello everyone, my name is Howell, and today I'm going to be talking to you about our paper, Visualizations to Summarize Search Behavior. Backtrack search is the only sound and complete method for solving a constraint satisfaction problem. Unfortunately, it suffers heavily from thrashing. In practice, thrashing is reduced by enforcing a given consistency property, but this costs further processing to actually enforce the property. The more strict the property, the more cost incurred, but also potentially more values will be pruned. The total trade-off of running a higher level consistency is poorly understood. To start to solve this issue, we propose to, instead of just looking at metrics at the end of search, we propose to summarize the entire search process. So for a bit of background, a constraint satisfaction problem, or a CSP, consists of a set of variables, the variables' domains, and a set of constraints. And so a solution to a CSP is an assignment of values in the domains to the variables such that each constraint is simultaneously satisfied. As I said, backtrack search is the only way of soundly and completely solving a CSP, and thrashing is the main malady of search. Thrashing, though, is repeatedly performing the same logic without being able to progress in search. So we apply a consistency algorithm after a variable instantiation, and this reduces thrashing by removing from the values of the domains of the variables values that could not possibly be in a solution to the CSP. In this work, we consider a higher level consistency to be a consistency that is higher than generalized arc consistency, which is the industry practice. Past visualizations have focused on debugging and inspecting search. Such notable works have detected thrashing by identifying isomorphic subtrees and by debugging individual issues in the search process by inspecting the state of variables, propagators, etc. More recently, work by Woodward et al. Have proposed to describe thrashing using the backtracks per depth metric by tracking the number of backtracks search makes at each depth of the search tree. They further propose to investigate the cost of higher level consistency by tracking the number of calls per depth of the search tree of the higher level consistency, and then partitioning those calls by the result of the call. Whether they were able to completely filter the values from the domain of a variable, thus causing a wipeout, whether they were only able to filter some values, or if they were able to filter no values at all and thus wasted the time of search on calling the higher level consistency. So in this work, we have three contributions. We propose a criteria for computing the distance between two time samples, and this distance is based on the BPD proposed by Woodward et al. We then use this distance in a clustering technique for summarizing search into a history of qualitatively distinct regimes. Finally, we propose a new visualization that examines the behavior of variable ordering heuristics. So, now that I've gone over the introduction, background, and our own contributions, I will go over each of the contributions individually, and I will give two examples showing how the clustering algorithm can be used in practice, and then how the variable ordering heuristic has been useful. Finally, I will conclude and discuss future work. We designed our distance function to capture the change in shape of the BPD over time. If the BPD shifts in location or in steepness or wideness, we want to be able to capture this change in the distance metric. Further, we do not care about the absolute magnitude of the BPD, as this will invariably change over time. Further, we adapt the Kullback-Leibler divergence metric to our problem. To do this, we first create a distribution from the backtracks per depth metric. We further use additive smoothing to account for zero probability intervals because there will be points in the graph where there is zero probability. We use this probability distribution to calculate the KL divergence between two timestamps. Because KL divergence is a pseudometric and not a proper metric, we take the max between the KL divergence between t and t prime and between timestamps t prime and t. And we treat this as our divergence method. Now that we have a distance function between two timestamps, we are able to summarize search history. So first, we create a clustering tree. To do this, we use agglomerative hierarchical clustering and only merge temporally adjacent clusters. We start with each sample that we took during the search process being its own cluster. Then we successively combine these clusters by merging the two clusters with the lowest divergence between the clusters. For clusters containing more than one time sample, we use the middle timestamp as the representative. Then we create a summarization tree by cutting the tree at a user-defined divergence delta, or to create N regimes. In our paper, we explore the use of our summarization techniques on the MUG 125.3 instance. Here we show the BPD of trying to solve the MUG 125.3 instance, which is a minimal unsolvable graph benchmark instance, using the GAC consistency and DOM-W-DAG variable ordering. Here we can see that there is a large magnitude of backtracks at the later depths in the search process. To get a better understanding of what is happening during search, we create a 0.1 summarization of the search process. Here we can see 7 different regimes that were formed. Search first creates an initial peak not too deep within the search tree, and then a second peak starts to form. The second peak actually grows until it overtakes the first drastically. This can be indicative of structural issues, so we analyze the primal graph of the instance. Looking at the primal graph of the instance, we actually see many large cycles. From experience, we know that cycles can vastly hinder search, and so we apply a new experimental higher level consistency called directional partial path consistency plus, which first triangulates the graph and then applies directional partial path consistency on the triangulated graph. This results in a successful termination of search, finding inconsistency in the problem in just 20 seconds instead of timing out. As you can see, the BPD of directional partial path consistency plus is much shallower than that of when we applied just GAC. To investigate the use of variable ordering heuristics during search, we developed the variable instantiations per depth metric. This metric tracks the number of instantiations of a variable at a specific depth, and further we delineate on the time. We present the variable instantiations per depth metric in the form of a heat map, with the x-axis being the depths of the search tree and the y-axis being the variable instantiations. We order the variables of the VIPD according to a variable's weighted depth, which is calculated by multiplying the instantiations of a variable at a depth times the depth and then dividing by the total number of instantiations of the variable. We fix the ordering of search to be that determined at the end of search for all of our examples. We present an example of trying to solve another instance of the minimal unsolvable graph benchmark, this time instance 100.1.3. We initially tried to solve this instance using GAC with DOM-WDAG ordering, but this times out at over 2 hours. We attempt to solve this problem again using partition 1 arc consistency, a higher level consistency, again with DOM-WDAG ordering. Unfortunately, this also times out. From the VIPD of these two searches, we can see that DOM-WDAG is not able to highlight any specific part of the problem and instead diverges in its behavior. This is counter to the intuition behind DOM-WDAG, because DOM-WDAG is supposed to learn which parts of the problem are more difficult than the others, and then work on those sub-problems first. Therefore, we try once again to solve the instance, using partition 1 arc consistency, but this time applying the DOM-DAG variable ordering heuristic. And this time we are actually able to solve the problem in just 40 minutes. To confirm our suspicions, we look at a 0.1 summarization of POC with DOM-WDAG and with DOM-DAG. Looking at the VIPD at the sample regime timestamps, we see that the DOM-WDAG does indeed go into chaotic behavior. And when looking at the VIPD when applying DOM-DAG over time, we see that it is much more stable. In conclusion, our summarizations can be used to help explain the changing behavior of the search process. Researchers and developers can use these tools to iteratively better gain an understanding of their particular instance and the ways that a search strategy or a given variable ordering heuristic have on the problem. Further, summarizations can catch small and large behaviors that a human cannot be expected to accomplish. The timestamps of the regimes in our previous examples were on the timescales of seconds, when in fact we ran search for over 2 hours. Additionally, while we did use a K-way solver in this work, initial results of the BPD with binary branching have given us similar results. While we provide a postmortem analysis in this work, our future work includes an in vivo analysis that will enable human experts to adapt their strategies to a particular instance in real time. At this time, I would like to acknowledge that this research is supported by an NSF grant and an NSF Career Award. Further, our experiments were performed using the equipment at the Holland Computing Center at the University of Nebraska, which received support from the Nebraska Research Initiative. Thank you.